Gifted education is a program for students who need more of a challenge than they are receiving in their general education classroom. Let's look deeper into that. In 1971, the Marler Report was created and published as a way to research gifted education in America and provide a structure on how gifted programs should be built. The Marler Report found that only a small percentage of children that should receive gifted education were receiving appropriate education. The Marler Report created an outcry from the people to create better, more structured gifted programs. Because of this outcry, the National State Leadership Training Institute on the Gifted and Talented, known as the NSLTIGT, was created in 1972. According to Cawley, a groundswell of educational programs emerged as a result of the success of NSLTIGT. However, the gifted education programs that were shaped by the NSLTIGT were not nearly sufficient, and by the mid-1980s, a new outcry for better gifted education programs began. Therefore, in 1983, A Nation at Risk was published, which put education at the forefront of American politics. According to Cawley in 2015, A Nation at Risk signaled glaring gaps continued to plague the education of gifted children. Unfortunately, A Nation at Risk did nothing to better the education of gifted children except to be used as evidence to advocate for gifted children to get them into better services. In fact, some would argue that A Nation at Risk did more damage than good to gifted children because it put a bigger emphasis on standardized testing and bringing lower achieving students to grade level and put less of an emphasis on gifted education.
So who is involved in gifted education programs, and how are students identified as gifted? Teachers, parents, school psychologists, state lawmaking officials, and students are all involved. Each state has a different definition of what makes a child gifted, as well as a different identification process. According to McLean and Pfeiffer, 13 states require the use of nominations and teacher and/or parent referrals. However, other states mandate the use of achievement tests, which is the most commonly used method across the United States. Each state has a state gifted coordinator who is responsible for these methods. School psychologists also have a role in the identification process in some states. For example, states that use the teacher scale for rating students' creativity in elementary school, or the TRSC for short, involve the school psychologist. According to Garcia-Ross et al., the TRSC is useful for school psychologists for improving and increasing the validity of the process of identifying gifted subjects, given that this tool facilitates the detection of students with a high creative potential while it fosters equity and equality of opportunities due to the absence of bias related to the student's gender. Current issues in gifted education include state policy, the social-emotional needs of gifted students, and fighting to solve multicultural discriminations in gifted programs. Young and Bali state that there are currently 4 types of gifted and talented educational GATE program choices that include cluster grouping in heterogeneous classes, part-time grouping, special classes, and magnet schools that enroll gifted students exclusively. Not many states currently mandate gifted education, so many local school districts have to make decisions about programs in their schools. Even schools with funding do not know how to serve gifted students in their schools. Aside from issues of funding alone, there are still many myths surrounding gifted students themselves. Many people believe that everything comes easily for gifted students and they do not have similar problems or emotional needs as other students in school. The truth is that students who are intellectually gifted are no more or less likely than their peers to face hardships and emotional distress. Fortunately, the United States still suffers from the belief in anti-intellectualism, which makes it difficult for students who are gifted to receive the recognition and support they need. Another current need in gifted education is more support and acceptance of minority students who belong in the gifted program. Fortunately, Black and Hispanic students are still underrepresented in gifted education programs across the U.S. Ford explains the 2 types of districts supporting multicultural students in the gifted program in his article. An equality district values sameness regardless of different opportunities and needs, whereas in an equity district, differences in students and their context or background are considered. Ford states in his article, an equality district uses a traditional test of intelligence containing 3 subscales, verbal, math, and nonverbal, to assess students for giftedness. Gifted services do not start until the 3rd grade in these districts, even though students have been tested and screened prior. Ford states that in equity districts, universal screening happens in the 1st grade using both a traditional and non-traditional test. There is still an issue of underrepresentation in equity districts, but their percentages of Black and Hispanic students in their gifted programs is rising.
As far as academics are concerned, when students are receiving gifted education, they are succeeding. According to the National Association for Gifted Children, pull-out gifted education programs increase students' knowledge and understanding, increase their motivation, and better student-teacher relationships. Additionally, children are shown to enjoy their pull-out groups and the learning they receive there. The NAGC stated that students who participated in gifted education programs received higher degrees more often than those that did not. On the downside, oftentimes gifted children are given labels such as geek or nerd, and in media are portrayed as having less friends, being unpopular, and unhappy with their social standing. However, research done by Lee et al. States that the majority of students did not believe that being gifted hurt them socially, and in fact vehemently denied such ideas. On the other hand, Wren et al.'s research concluded that some gifted students do not enjoy going to school at all because they feel they do not get as much support from their peers and school personnel as their non-gifted counterparts.
There are many pros and cons for gifted education programs in schools. One of the most well-known positives is that the students are challenged and learn at a level that is appropriate for them. So, according to the National Association for Gifted Children, students who had participated in gifted programs maintained their interest over time and stayed involved in creative, productive work after they finished college and graduate school, and also had a positive effect on students' post-secondary plans. This means that students in gifted education programs stay involved in their interests longer and have more future plans than if they hadn't been put in these programs. So, cons to gifted education programs. For example, the gifted program has one clear definition. However, the gifted student can be gifted in a variety of ways, making it a challenge for all gifted students' needs to be met in this one program. Another con is that students who aren't involved in the gifted program and their parents may feel like they are being excluded from an elite group.
There are many goals that have been set based off of the current state of gifted education that hope to make a great impact in this area in the future. Roberts and Pierre state that more research can still be done in the field of gifted education. Their hope is that researchers can look at what was implemented in the past and use it to further their research about what will work for this program in the future. They have identified 4 major needs of the gifted and talented program for the future: more legislation, explanations and definitions of these students, more collaboration between educators, and models for teaching these students. There is not currently a lot of counseling support for gifted students. Hopefully more research can be provided in the future. If parents and educators wish to provide more of these services for their students, they may wish to consider developing their own position papers, educational resources, and advocacy toolkits for counselors as well as for gifted individuals. Multicultural advocates are setting goals to make some exciting progress in the way of gifted education. One goal comes in the form of an equity formula. Ford explains that the equity formula will hopefully provide a 20% allowance and give decision makers and policymakers a targeted formula to adopt and set minimal representation goals to address discrepancies. Using the data from the formula, researchers will be able to set goals for Black and Hispanic students' participation in these programs. Ford states that meeting equity goals requires interrogating policies and procedures, criteria, and installments, along with supports given to culturally different students and their families or caregivers. We as a group feel that gifted education is a positive program that should be mandated in schools across the country because of the strong positive effect